Frank, I couldn't thank you enough for this mentoring session today. I feel smarter. I feel brighter. I feel somehow more handsome from just hanging out with you for an hour.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch. You mentoring son of a bitch.
I'm so happy to be spending time on this Wednesday with my mentor, Frank Cava.
There is no doubt. I'm becoming more and more valuable as days go by.
I don't know what I would do in life without your mentorship and guidance.
Our wives would figure it out without us. I have a feeling.
Your big ham hands guiding me through life. It's fantastic.
So we are going to talk today about mentors. I read a really cool article that we're going to bring up in a second. But Ian, I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm going through an IRS audit. Do you know where I'm not going to go looking for mentorship?
The IRS?
So my IRS agents looked at me with a straight face yesterday. We're almost done. He's looking at travel. And if you're a small business owner, travel is something that, gets hit quite a bit. But the point of the matter is we're going through travel and he goes, there's been an enormous spike in your travel in 2022 from 2020 and 2021. I said, oh yeah, is that so? It went up. He goes, yes, the percentages are enormous. I was like, something happened prior to 2022. What was it? He goes, I don't know. I watched the news. I go, there was something big that kind of happened that was dictating, maybe people didn't go as far. He goes, what do you mean? I said, we had a global pandemic. I believe that the vaccine came out somewhere in the middle, the end of 2021. So people actually started going places in 2022. corporate travel kind of opened up. And
what did he say to that?
He goes, oh, I'm like, so he's like, so what did you do? I was like, people got the hell out of the office. Nobody traveled for 2 years. I sent people to trainings and we went to different states and we went to conferences. We had all kinds of stuff. He's like, oh, but like, why? I'm like, are you not listening to me?
Who are they employing? This is what Doge was looking to get rid of.
Sadly, they didn't go deep enough. But this conversation sadly didn't end there. I had to take a different flight that was really expensive. And he goes, well, this flight, it's excessive. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, do you know why I took that flight? He goes, no, I didn't look. I go, well, there was a hurricane that canceled my other flight. So I took this more expensive flight because I needed to get somewhere. And there was a hurricane. He goes, this was 2022. I said, yes, they had hurricanes in 2022. Hurricanes predate 2022 like they've been happening for a lot of years.
The whole argument, though, of like, whose definition of excessive? You're going to tell, like, my time is valuable. Maybe yours isn't, but I'll be the judge of what I pay for my travel and what I value my time to be.
I was like, leave it to the goddamn IRS to put something in there that's judgmental. It's completely and totally, it's subjective. Everything's subjective. So I'm not going there looking for mentor advice. I know Ian likes to overpay his taxes and get enormous checks so he can tell me about a Kenny Chesney concert.
I do like to overpay my taxes significantly.
It's a yin and a yang. You get everything here at
they don't audit you when you just are always like getting refunds later. They're like, oh, this idiot always overpays.
So I was reading an article that I thought was really interesting. So speaking of cool businesses, there's a business out there. It's called the Athletic. The Athletic was independent, but they were bought by the New York Times. So Ian reads them less now because they're controlled by a liberal rag. I will leave that out. But there's a really cool story in it, and it's about this guy named Sean McVay. Sean McVay is kind of the wonder kid in NFL football right now. He was a very young assistant. He worked under John Gruden. He worked under Shanahan. Both of them, he was like peers with the younger Shanahan. And the LA Rams hired him young. He was the youngest coach in the history of the NFL, and he's the youngest winning Super Bowl coach in the history of the NFL. And everybody thought he was just this amazing, like, high riser. And a few years ago, it came out that he was contemplating retirement. And the Rams are incredibly well run. Their management said, look, take some time, step away. We think you're great. We want to keep you here. Let's figure this out. So ultimately, they figured it out, and he got a new contract, and they went through a complete revamp of their roster because they kind of bottomed out after the Super Bowl. What happens? So a few years later, because all this is 3-4 years in the rearview mirror at this point, it turns out that there was a mentorship that emerged during this kind of existential crisis that McVay was having. A guy by the name of Chris Peterson, who made Boise State popular. Boise State is the football team that plays on the bluegrass. If you remember years ago, they did the trick play that they beat Oklahoma. So Chris Peterson saw what was happening from afar, texted with one of his quarterbacks from the past who had McVay's number. He left him a voicemail, very humbly said, hey, I don't know if you've ever heard of me. My name is Chris Peterson. And he had this incredible voicemail, and it turned into a friendship. It was just somebody who saw somebody, he could relate to it. He saw a young coach who was at the top of his game, but he knew he was hollow inside, and he called and left a message. So what that prompted in me is, hey, Ian, let's talk about some really cool mentorship relationships. But I just thought that was a really, really meaningful thing that kind of became public. And it's a really cool story if you want to go read it. But that's what got us thinking about mentorship.
Yeah. We'll get into where mentors come from. And it's not often like that. You normally don't have an amazing mentor fall out of the sky and land on your face.
Correct.
Like that's pure luck. And it's really not even pure luck. That really, when I think of that story, Sean McVay is one of the, top 5 coaches name recognition in all of professional sports, because the NFL is the big dog. So reaching out to a guy with a name like that, who's already been to a Super Bowl, lost the Super Bowl when he reached out to him, you're not going to get that kind of luck where a big name like Chris Peterson reaches out and says, how can I help you? Normally your mentors early in a career are going to be mentors to you for selfish reasons. So when Frank was asking me who some of my earliest influences were and some of my best early mentors right out of college at GE, they were managers. They were people who had a selfish reason to invest in me. They had, and these are not selfish people. These were amazing managers. But if they were being honest with you, they wouldn't have done it if I didn't work for them. They wouldn't have spent nearly as much time if they didn't think they were going to get a return. I was very fortunate in that I had 2 managers and a third really when I started GE. One was a sales manager, Bob Connors, who was fantastic. That was the guy who promoted me and gave me the opportunity. He was younger, more, enthusiastic, high energy, just a great team builder, good culture builder. And then I had an operational manager. He was like our engineering manager, but we sort of supported his business. He was an older guy. He was probably 5 years from retiring, Paul Steele, who was just a brilliant tactician, really smart guy, but kind of in the final, stages of his career, but still ambitious. And he was local. So he was in my office in Chicago. Bob was in St. Louis. Both of them were great mentors, but I had a third who was a guy named Jim Reichel, who was like a year from retiring. And Jim didn't really even have a job anymore, other than just he was there to help make the business go a little better. He was like a number 2 around there, but everyone knew he was leaving. And I went out of my way to turn him into my mentor. He was this old kind of like grumpy guy who just wanted to retire soon. And he was really smart and had crazy credibility when you put him in front of a customer, because he had been in the market for like 40 years. He knew every installation. He knew everything. And at first he had like no reason to spend time with me. I was cold calling, I was prospecting, I was working on little, pissant jobs that I was going after. But I pursued him aggressively as someone who could help me, because every time I was around him, I felt like I needed a pen in my hand. Like I was learning that much whenever I was around him, both technically, business wise, professionally. Everything he said was gold. And I went out of my way to build that relationship and convince him that he should spend as much of his last year with me as anything else, right? He didn't have to, but I would convince him to go spend 8 hours in a day driving to 5 different customers. Things he did not want to do in his last year. He wanted to show up to the office, read the paper, drink some coffee, sit in on a few meetings, write a proposal, go home. And I had him working his ass off. It was people around the office joked that it was like, do you remember the um what was the movie with Mel Gibson and uh Danny Glover? Uh
That was a
uh
cop movie.
cop movie
Maybe,
where
what was it? Give me a second. I'll think of it.
it- regardless, remember when Mel Gibson was like kind of a crazy partner and all Danny Glover wanted to do was retire,
Yep.
and he just kind of kept saying I'm too old.
Lethal Weapon.
Lethal Weapon. He just kept saying I'm too old for this shit the whole movie. That was like that was the joke, was like I was Mel Gibson and he was Danny Glover, because even driving, like he didn't like driving with me because I was like 22 and I drove real fast and passed people on the passing lane. And I went out of my way to make him comfortable and make him like me. And he had as big an impact on me and my career as Paul Steele and Bob Connors did, who were also amazing mentors. But that guy had nothing to do with being my manager, and I went out of my way to cultivate that relationship.
So if we talk about the Sean McVay thing with Chris Peterson, or we talk about like famous mentorships, right? Like there's some famous mentorships. I put a whole list together that Ian liked so much he removed it from the agenda. But one of them was Maya Angelou and Oprah, and another one was Bill Gates with Warren Buffett. So
Maya Angelou, the famous Cuban
painter.
painter who became a feminist and real champion of women's rights. Is that
That
right?
is actually Frida Kahlo. It's a different one, but
We're gonna put that in the show notes that Matthew's nailed who Maya is.
my wife will be so proud of you. However, the reason I bring this up here, and I think this is kind of worth bringing in, there's famous examples in the world that you hear about all the time. What got me thinking about this was a famous story. It was in a big publication. Ian's 3 examples of good people are not noteworthy outside of Ian's life. Clearly very important to Ian, but not important that's going to make it into the headlines. So the reason that you hear about the big famous ones, those people just have more reach. But what I wanted to talk about today is that this actually happens across every single part of life. And you hear about the big ones, but the little ones you don't hear about still happen a lot. And I think what it came up when you were talking, and I want to go over this. You use his name down here. There's 6 human needs. And of those 6 human needs, there's certainty, variety, significance, loving connection, growth, and contribution. And the way that I would look at that is mentorship satisfies 3. It satisfies significance, it satisfies connection, and it satisfies contribution. So people are desperate to be mentors. They are. Like if you see 2 homeless people on the street and they're talking, one guy is giving the other guy advice. Like that's how this works. People want to be heard and they want to be listened to. And it's your job as a mentee to figure out the people you should listen to and the people maybe you shouldn't. But if you are open-minded and receptive and you understand what mentorship really is, sometimes it's many, many skips away from you. And sometimes it's one person who's right above you in rank. And in some instances, it's somebody who's below you in rank, but has a superior skill set than you have, and you can get mentorship there. So mentorship is prevalent in every part of life. And I think it's there because it's so incredibly important to who we are as humans.
I think so. When Frank says they can be above you, below you, or parallel, I think mentorship is skill dependent. It's skill dependent. So you could be 20 years older than me and I could mentor you on technology. I could mentor you on new marketing tactics that are a little more relevant to the market. I can mentor you in a lot of different ways, Now, I'm not going to call myself a mentor. It
Correct.
seems odd to say you're a mentor to someone much older than you, but mentoring is all about the skill and not so much about the, holistic, I'm just a career mentor. There are some people like that, but I found that most of my mentors filled a very specific niche that was a hole in my skills, right? So each Bob Connors taught me about culture and team building and doing the right thing and work ethic, whereas in Paul Steele was teaching me more about tactics and delivery and how to compete against a competitor. It was different mentoring that I was getting.
Who who is someone that maybe you should have listened to as a mentor, or an example or a time where you probably should have listened to someone as a mentor because of their rank, but they just didn't jive with you? Like, you didn't like them from perspective of how they operated, how they conducted their business, who they were morally or ethically. Like, do you have an example that comes to mind? Because I can think of one or a couple.
Well, so I think so before, without giving you a name,
Yeah, I don't want to.
I've had some amazing managers who I soaked up everything they said. And I've had some managers that I just did enough to stay off their radar and knew I could care less about their advice because I didn't respect them. So I think this is an important point that I think you're getting at in that question, in that just because someone is your boss does not make them your mentor.
Or is superior to you in some way.
Yes. Like
Yes.
I have had some deplorable people that I've worked for. I've had some incompetent people that I've worked for that I had no respect for. I did what I needed to do because they were my superior. I'm not an idiot, especially if I like the company. If I like the
Yep.
company and I like what I do, good companies last, bad managers don't. So you can just wait them out a little bit if you indeed love what you do. And if you have stock options and you really don't want to leave, which was my case. But I've had plenty of managers that I could say, nope, not mentors, not how I would do things. My immediate two managers after Bob Connors were terrible, even though they were at GE and they were executives. Actually, I had like three bad ones immediately following that. And I can't say I took too much away from them. I didn't have the same amount of respect for them. And ultimately, it was kind of like a three strikes. I left GE. I was like, Jesus, like, I, I went from three incredible mentors right out of the gate to three shitty executives. And I don't care how much you pay me, how much you promote me, what titles you give me. I'm not learning from these people. In fact, I'm probably getting worse by working for them. I got to get the hell out of here.
So one of the people who is going to get mentioned again in a little bit, and I'm not going to use his name specifically, but I learned this when I was really young at Ryan Holmes, and what he said was, I learned from this person's strengths and weaknesses. And just because someone's in a position of mentorship, you may disagree with them morally or ethically, or you might look at how they build their life and you say, that's not the way I want to do it. Like, there was a guy who was a mentor to me in my early career, and he talked about like how he would go and party and like cheat on his wife. And I immediately had like, there was an asterisk there. I'm like, that's somebody that I can't completely trust. So there are a lot of people who want to be mentors, and it is up to you to pick and choose the right people to penetrate, or to learn from both the strengths and the weaknesses, and then choose who maybe you align yourself with. And those things are very different. But I think it's worth just noting before we kind of get into some examples.
You hear Trump supporters say this all the time, right? Where how could you have voted for Donald Trump? Look at the stuff he got himself into with the lawsuits, and look at this, and they're kind of always like, it's complicated, right? Or it's like, well, I like his policies. Yeah, I don't like how he handles a lot of things, and I think it's the same with mentors. What you just said really resonated. I've had a few mentors that personally I wanted nothing to do with the way they lived their life, but professionally, they did some shit really well that I learned from and I respected. And if you were to ask me, like, how could you call that a mentor? It'd be like, complicated. I learned from the good stuff and I compartmentalize where I learned from them and what I took from them. I'm not going to take everything. I've had some others that were really good at the balance. Like, I've worked for some folks that were really good dads, kind of lousy managers, but they were good dads. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I like the way that they leave an office early and they go coach their kid in a sport and they're not afraid to tell us all they're leaving early. Kind of liked that. And it was like, okay, I'm going to take that. I'm going to steal a little bit of that, but there's a lot of things that I'm just going to ignore because I don't think it's effective.
So every person that you deal with is flawed in some ways. I'm flawed in some ways. As hard as this is for Ian to admit, he's flawed in some ways. Every mentor that you might
Notice
have.
that Frank admitted it, but I did not.
You're welcome for saying it for you. But the point of that is everybody has flaws. So the biggest thing with mentors is taking the things that are resonating with you and you build your own game based upon it. And this is a funny story that I think is worth talking about. So there's a movie that came out 20 years ago called American Pie. And it was so popular, there was American Pie 2. And there was like this book about how you could be like really successful with women. And it was like if you follow this book, it's going to work. Like that's not how life works. It's not how love works. It isn't how business or mentorship works. It's not like, here, follow this recipe and you're going to have brownies at the end. It's not how it goes. So what mentorship is mentorship is a little bit of chipping in from a bunch of different people and picking and choosing the right things and kind of getting a foothold on those things inside of your life and using them to kind of catapult yourself ahead and forward. And sometimes it's multiple rungs away and sometimes it is right next to you. But it's really important to learn and kind of just you choose who you ultimately want to be and become, what's worth modeling and what isn't. Is that fair before I move into some examples of good ones I've had?
Yeah.
So in my life, it always starts with my parents. I know Ian and I are both the same way. His dad and mom, my parents are the biggest mentors in my lottery ticket, right? For both of us. But no good podcast is complete without a mention of the Outback. I had two very, very, very good
Outback Steakhouse, Southern Florida.
That's correct. I had two incredible managers there that taught us great lessons about things. Like one of them taught me like how not to screw around with someone in management because like he jumped down my throat when I did something stupid and he deserved to. And it was like a memorable thing. Another one showed incredible empathy when I needed it. Great, great, great leaders in very different ways. And one ran kind of like a bedroom community store and was calm. And the guy that was in the college town was kind of a party animal. And you kind of think of this 20 years later and go, someone knew what they were doing. They put those two guys in the right spots, but they were great mentors. We had football coaches that were incredible mentors. And mentorship is a very, very powerful thing. So I'm going to tell you a story. Do you know the reason or why I ended up in Virginia? Do you know like why I chose Ryan Holmes out of college?
No.
So I'll tell you the name off air. But there was a guy who was 3 or 4 years older than me who went to Penn State. He would have been my boss if I decided to come to NVR. He was a mid-level manager. And they interviewed me. They liked me. I met him. He and I got along. And he's like, why don't you come back up and I'll take you and show you my house. I built this house when I was 26 years old. This is something you can do. And I remember standing in this guy's house, and I live in a shitty apartment where I had to walk across the street to do laundry in college. And I'm like, I want to live in a house like this. And he explained how NVR did it and how like this whole thing worked. He goes, you can come here, you can work here for 2 years, you can get a lumber package, you can get a discount, you can use your ability, like you can really set yourself up. And this was one of the biggest mentors in the history of my life. And it was the reason I had moved to Virginia. And
he should have mentored you a little bit more on septic tanks, though, probably.
That's
the last episode.
That's a lesson that was learned. But we talked about that an episode or two ago. But this person I bumped into recently in the last couple of years, and there's no other word for it, is he was just a dick. He was one of the people that I had on Mount Rushmore in my life, and I still hold him there, but I just don't have a relationship with him that's current. And one of the things that came up with me, and I thought about this and I've explained it to several people, is this. I have a sister who's 14 years younger than me. And I was kind of being a jerk to her when she was maybe 5 or 6, and I was like teens to 20s. And my mom pulled me aside and she said, Frankie, be careful. Be careful. Your sister looks up to you in a way that is so incredibly meaningful to her. Just be careful. And that's all my mom said. Just be careful. And that was it. It was over. But the lesson that I learned from my mom with my sister is you can't pick who looks up to you. You can't. You might want to, but you can't do that. But if you get the honor of having someone who looks up to you, preserve it because it's care. It's something that deserves care. And this person who I really looked up to, I think is now an ass. He is so incredibly meaningful in my life. But so you have to be mindful of the fact that you are probably a mentor if you're listening to this to somebody, and it's very meaningful to those people. And if you handle it right and you're the right type of a mentor, you understand that relationship and you understand there's a fragility to it and there's something that's really, really precious about it. And it requires respect, if you will. And that's what, to me, what a good mentorship is and kind of feels like, especially one of the bigger ones in your life.
I like the be careful thing too, because there's a lot of things that mentors of mine said to me that if I were to tell them they said it to me now, 10 years later, 20 years later, they would not remember it at all. It was like throwaway advice. I've had that
Exactly.
happen. I've had that happen many times where people be like, I remember one time you told me, Ian, that, my demo day, or you told me this, and I don't remember that conversation. I don't really remember your demo day, right? I did lots of those, but to you, that was a very big day. That was a big conversation. So you have to be careful. People are always listening. They're always paying attention. If they respect you, if they look up to you in that kind of a light.
And what's important to you is probably not what's important to them. So just having that respect for that relationship. And if you're a manager, people are going to look up to you just inherently because of the rank. So it's your job to just be careful. So Ian, can you remember the first time that you were a mentor to someone in business?
Yeah, it was again, it was very early in my career. We hired interns, and maybe I was like 2 years out of college, and we hired interns, and then shortly after we hired some folks on a leadership program. And so my job was to get them up to speed to learn how to sell. Like their whole job was to cold call and set up appointments. And so I would have to train them in the evenings. I would get up early and I would go visit customers all over Chicagoland until like 5. And then I would spend 3 or 4 hours with them, role playing, teaching, putting lessons together so that they were a little more effective. What did we get today? How many calls did we make? How many appointments did you guys set up? Where are you getting stuck? Okay, let's role play that. Let's go through how I handle that. And what's interesting is a couple of the people, this is 25 years ago. A couple of the people are two of my best friends today, David and Dennis. They're folks that I've worked with throughout the rest of my career. And it's something that we're going to get to a little bit more. When you're seeking out a mentor, a lot of times, you think, wow, it'd be great if I got to an uber successful person and they could be my mentor. Like, how cool would it be if Jeff Bezos was my mentor? But the problem with someone who's that far away is they don't
Right.
relate. They don't relate anymore. They don't, so for me, I was a good mentor because I had just been a college graduate 2 years before these two people I'm talking about. I had just been a brand new dipshit that didn't know how to sell 2 years before. I knew where they were struggling. I knew where they were getting stuck. I was just ahead of them, like one rung on the ladder ahead. I
Yep.
was not 12 rungs ahead where they couldn't even relate with my success. I was right there. I was so close. They could taste the success that I had had in sales already. And so it made them more eager as apprentices listening to me and me investing in them, but it also made them more relatable to me. I felt for them. I wanted them to win. I knew what they were struggling with. I knew what kind of support emotionally they needed because cold calling sucks, what kind of motivation they needed. But I also knew tactically where they were probably tripping themselves up and what type of hand-holding and skill development they needed.
So what I will weigh in on this here is a couple things. One of my favorite stories about mentorship is actually when Zupan broke his neck. And Zupan broke his neck when we were all 19 years old, and he basically lived at his house. And like Nickel and I would go over there all the time. So this is a friend of mine who was in a really bad car accident and like got flipped out of the back of a truck and like became a quadriplegic. And for about 18 months, like nobody knew any different. We just did what we used to do. We just dragged his ass around in a wheelchair and made him come with us. And he hung out with all of us. And by some stroke of luck, he ended up at Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech has one of the preeminent programs for people in wheelchairs. So he ended up around a bunch of people in wheelchairs. And these people weren't necessarily mentors, they were peers, but they were doing the same thing he was doing and they were adjusting. Some were less time in the chair, some were more. So kind of putting yourself in the mix with people is what Ian's talking about. Like there's younger people there. That's kind of where like it's mentorship, but it's peer relationships, and those things really, really matter. And where you surround yourself, like there's famous examples of people picking up and moving to a different place where there's a bunch of people like them, like Silicon Valley. It's a lot of the same type of people because they're doing the same type of stuff. So it's easier to relate. So those are kind of peer relationships versus mentor relationships. And with peer relationships, I think you can learn a lot, and you can, what I would say with the people that Ian's referring to without saying their names, those were peer relationships that became friendships. And that's how a lot of this stuff goes, is it's a peer relationship. But over time, you kind of realize the peer relationship can evolve and it moves to different places. But I think I kind of relate learning skills, becoming a mentee, becoming a mentor. It's kind of like dot collection, and you just don't know where the dots are going to connect. So over time, you try and connect as many quality dots as you can. And every once in a while, you sit back and you try and connect things like, oh, all this kind of comes together. And that's how you figure things out kind of over time.
So Frank got into some of the basic needs, but there's psychology behind mentoring, and why people give their time. The first one, I would not consider psychology. It's, some kind of selfish component, right? So let's even take mine. Let's take the one I just gave when the first time I was a mentor. To David, I was his manager. I was the sales manager, and the trainees reported to me. To the interns, I was also sort of their manager, right? I brought them in. They looked at me as their boss. I was the one that was going to give them a review at the end. I had a selfish component of wanting to make them successful. I wanted them to be successful so that my managers would think I was good at leading people. So it was important to me. I also wanted the program to be successful. I had sold this internship program as something that would help all the salespeople. So I was a very willing and eager mentor. I don't know that I would have done that for random people. I don't know that I would have worked from 5 to 8 every night teaching training if I didn't have some selfish component to it. And so for the most part, the psychology normally behind it, there is some component. Most people's mentors have some reason why they're doing it, that it will come back to them. They're either a boss, or they work within the company, or they want to be seen as altruistic or a good coach or a good mentor, some form of teammate. But it started that way, but it grew into something much more. It grew into, I really formed, I cared for them. I really wanted it. I started to feel valued in a different way, right? Before that, I was valued because of my skill set of selling. I was valued because I was persuasive. I was good with customers. I made the company money. I started to feel, in psychology, it's called the self-determination theory. And it kind of satisfies different psychological needs, but feeling like you're competent, feeling like someone respects my opinion, and that I can help. There's the second piece of it is relatedness. So building relationships. Can I relate with this? Do they relate with me? And then autonomy. I loved the fact that I could pick and choose how I trained and taught these folks and how to be better. So that self-determination theory, and that goes along with another psychological one, which is social exchange theory, they're kind of the same. There's this reciprocal dynamic between you and the person that you are mentoring. And for me, it felt good. It felt good to my self-esteem. It felt good to my ego. It made me feel more valuable. So what started as something that I had to do in order to grow in the company became something I loved doing, became something that I was eager to do. And it became more about their success because I cared about them, almost like a parent would care about, their kid doing well at a recital or doing good on a paper. You feel good because that they're mine and I put a lot of my time and effort into it. You start to feel that way a little bit as a mentor.
So I think that's a bunch of stuff that's really good, and it comes down to the psychology of it, and it works really well. And I think what Ian's talking about is, in its purest form, the good that can come with this. So I'm not going to use a name. This is somebody whose name I said it, you would just guffaw because you feel the same way about this schmuck as I do. But there was a regional like marketing or sales director who was overlapped with Ian and me when we were both at NBR. And I think he took the mentoring role to a sinister place where it served his needs and was very, very, very selfish. So you have to be careful of this because there is a power dynamic of this. And this is the be careful component. As someone who is, you have to pick and choose where you want to go in life and where you want to go. You have to kind of, sorry, I got interrupted. You need to kind of steer where it is you want to go, and then how do you want to do these things. So if you are happy at a company and you want to be a mentor and do that stuff, you can use it in a way that's very, very positive. But it can also be an ego trip that goes to your head, and it can become a currency that you trade in, and it becomes the opposite of the good stuff. It's like, I wield this power over you. It's Star Wars shit. It's the dark side. There's a lot of power in it, and done properly, it turns into really, really, really productive, great relationships that can turn into friendships and multi-year things. You use one of the names, so I'll say it again. David is someone you've done multiple business ventures with. Turned out like you were just slightly his superior. Now you guys work together really well on big things. That's how this stuff can become huge down the line. This entire conversation started with coaching. Two coaches where we had a mutual respect for each other, and one reached out to the other. They don't really talk about this in business, but they do in football all the time. It's called your coaching tree. Who did you work with? Who'd you coach under? How all that stuff work? And like Aaron Rodgers just came out of retirement to go to the Steelers. He's going to go play for a guy that played underneath somebody else that had the same system, so they have the same language. In sports, it's more fun to talk about than it is with business. But when you come into something, you're like, ooh, I remember this person who treated me the right way, or this person took my advice and incorporated it the right way. There might be a better pick for the person on the team, but for you as a leader or a manager, what you pick is the people you know you can get along with and get the job done with. And that's the soft benefit of a lot of mentorship.
Yeah, I love that. And when the self-esteem piece, the ego enhancement in the hands of the wrong person, that's a bottomless pit. And there's a fine line between mentoring someone and manipulating them.
Yes.
And using that power dynamic for your own good to enhance your own self-esteem. You see that a lot of times with people that are the wrong kind of mentor, where they hold people down. They shield their successes. They take credit for things, right? They say positive things to them when they're around it, but then they kind of belittle them a little in positions where they could help them grow because, oh no, what if I lose this person? What if they get promoted? What if they go to another team? What if they get transferred? You're doing mentoring right when you are truly happy for someone's success, when it means that it's going to hurt you a little bit, right? Them moving on is not great for you because you put a lot of time and effort, but they moved on and they're successful. You're a good mentor when you're just happy for them, I was truly happy when David went to audit staff and then went to Harvard and started his own business. I was happy for him. I wasn't even bothering trying to recruit him to come to MBR. He was flying, he was kicking ass. And, the time I spent mentoring him was very short lived. he outgrew me really fast and kicked ass. And till today, I'm proud of everything the guy does.
Some of my favorite mentorship type of things is just when you're kind of doing your own thing and you don't even really know the people and you get a thank you card in the mail, or, hey, went back to this training you did like a couple of years ago. I just wanted to say thanks. Like, if you put enough good stuff out there, you just don't know what's going to resonate with others. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons we keep showing up here, is because it's just things we've learned, lessons, and talking those things through, and you just put them out into the ether. And then at some point, hopefully someone latches onto it and said, oh, that's pretty good.
So if you need a mentor, right? Frank and I kind of thought about this, and I think, I don't know that you and I ever really sat around. I have a couple of examples where I thought about it, but certainly when I was grinding away at Fortune 500s for 20 years, I thought about the people I surrounded myself with, and I did seek out mentors in those companies. But a lot of it was organic. It was kind of as part of what I was doing. I was making impressions on people.
Yep.
But you got to start. You got to start by, what are your goals? What are you looking to learn? What kind of a mentor do you want? I'll go back to, what's the skill set you are trying to fill out, right? Where do you struggle? Where do you have a gap? Where do you need coaching and advice? And, you know, if you don't identify your goals, you can't really choose which type of a mentor you want, right? If you're right out of college, you got to fill all kinds of gaps. So I would try to, just like you asked me my first mentor, I had 3, like, and they were all great. But they all filled different needs. They all filled different holes I had in my skill set. So I was aggressive about grabbing mentors wherever I could get them. But you got to start with, what are my goals? Where am I trying to develop myself? Where are my insecurities? Where are my skill gaps? And who could help fill that out?
So I think there's a difference between mentors and there's a difference between mentors and training. So I'll give you an example. So when I worked at Ryan Homes, I started off in construction. I worked under several different senior project manager types who taught me the ropes. And then I had my own neighborhoods, and then I was mentoring some people. And then I moved into a kind of an office role for like 6 to 9 months. And then they moved me into sales. And when I moved into sales, what I realized pretty quickly is I had the construction knowledge down, but I'm pretty weak on the sales side. And I broke it into a couple of components. And what I did with each component is I asked my boss, I said, who that you manage is the best at each one of these things? And I just called them up and said, hey, can I come shadow you? That's not really mentorship, that's training. And if you promise not to be in their way and just learn and ask a couple of questions, like I went to 3 or 4 people's models on my day off and just sat there, and I asked them, like, hey, how'd you get so good at this? What did you do? How'd you learn it? What do you like? That type of stuff. And what I have found is people love to be respected and called out for good achievement. And they're always willing to help someone who's eager, that puts them on a pedestal. And that's a little bit different though, because that's a training component. Those were not like mentors. But from mentors, I kind of saw people that took an arc or going in a direction or doing something bigger than I was doing. And that's kind of what I chased after. But I kind of knew where I wanted to go, and identifying what your goal is long term or where I'm going. Those are the types of things that would give you really good guidance. And the other thing for me, I moved from Florida because I saw this guy's house. He was 2 or 3 jobs away from me. I was like, I can get there in 4 or 5 years because he did that. So you can kind of see some of the stair steps, and those become kind of the North Stars that you can chase after over time, because you know where you want to go and you can see people who've done it.
So I think it's worth, if you were to watch 2 different people helping someone fill a skill gap, and you were just to watch a thin slice of 20 minutes, they would look identical. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. The difference between a mentor and a trainer, mentors, it's more personal.
100%. There's a relationship.
There's more connection. There's a relationship. It's more confidential. You can
Yep.
tell a mentor something and say, can you keep this between us? Where a trainer, is sort of paid to kind of go report back on how the person's doing to some superior that they're paid to train.
But if you're
Right?
the right kind of person, you can turn almost anybody into a trainer, and it doesn't have to be a heavier lift than just a skill that you acquire. With a mentorship, there's real things there where you can actually just fill your own gap. That's what I'm trying to tell you is that, like, in some instances, you may not need a full mentor. You just might need a day with somebody who shows you the cheat code. That's cool. There's not a bigger thing there.
Yeah, it's just there's more personality involved. That, like, with a trainer, it's more of a teacher-student vibe, right?
Yep.
It's more of a superior, inferior type of vibe. Whereas a mentor, you transcend a little bit more. But what I'll say there on this, Frank, is um, in most cases, you have to get the personal right to get the training, because
100%.
if it's a true mentor, they're usually not responsible for you and you're kind of seeking them out.
Yep.
And so you have to go connect with them and get them to like you, or why would they invest the
Right.
time
Why would they lean
to
into
do it?
you?
And that even goes for some seniors. So when I was running operations for NVR, I used to do a new hire orientation every 2 months, and there'd be 30 kids in there, most of them that we had just hired out of college, all of them eager, all of them excited, all of them would have desperately loved to have had me as a personal mentor. I didn't have time to be everyone's mentor. There's 800 people in MVR Mortgage. I couldn't be everyone's mentor, but I was a mentor to a few of them.
Yep.
So you could build a relationship with me, and you could show an uncommon ambition that resonated with me, that made me think I'd like to help this person. But I didn't leave that orientation think I'd like to mentor all of them. You don't have the time. I didn't think that. I was
Right.
there. I gave some training. I gave some advice. Maybe some of them thought I did some mentoring that day, but I didn't have a personal relationship with all of them. I wanted to. I would have loved to have had a personal relationship with everyone. But the truth was
Can't.
that it wasn't possible. So start with your goals in mind. And then my advice is start in your company. So if you can find these people in your company, that's the easiest way to do it. There's always going to be some selfish desire, because even at the smallest level of being seen as someone who's helping another person in the company, you're going to have an easier time finding mentors in there. The thing I would say, especially if you're starting in your company, what not to do: don't ask someone to be your mentor.
Oh, God. No.
That's the worst thing you could possibly do. I've seen that advice on social media. Just to ask. No, don't ever ask someone to be your mentor, because that feels like a job. Now you are giving me a title. Now you're giving me responsibility. That's like asking me to adopt you. Don't say that. Like that. That's not the way. If you want mentoring, just ask for advice on one specific challenge you're having.
I have two. I have two young high school kids or college kids. They're in the early. They're underclassmen in college interning. And one of the interns is like, I want to learn this, and I want to learn this, and I want to learn this, and like, how can he help me learn this? And I said, that's the absolute back-assward way to do it. The right way to do it is to just say, what can I do to help? What can I do to make your job easier? What is it that I can do that can take the burden off of you? Is there any heavy lifting I can do to get in to give you the opportunity to step up and do other things? Those are learning opportunities, and that's how that stuff tends to work. Is they're going to give you shit that they think that's kind of waste of their time, but if you can prove reliable there, very quickly you get promoted into better stuff. And that you just that's the best way to help to gain mentorship, is to get proximity and to get repeat tasks given to you by someone. And if you do those things, that's how the relationship begins and starts.
The most important thing to what Frank said, and what Frank said is incredibly important if you're looking for a mentor, is you get one little piece of advice, you get one little challenge that they give you, you get one little thing that you take on. Where I see most people totally screw up is they call me, they text me, they email me, they ask me for advice. I share a few stories with them, I share some advice. I never hear from them again. And it makes me not want to pick my phone up the next time you call.
Yep.
You didn't tell me how it went. You didn't tell me if you applied anything I said. You didn't tell me like that. This is simple shit like that anyone in sales is taught very early. You follow up as much as you can. But hey, Frank, Do you remember when you shared that story about when you were first starting with that first condo you bought? Man, I got to tell you, I took that advice to heart. I bought my first condo and it's really been successful over the last 6 months. Like that stuff goes, if you say that to Frank, you shared a story with me and I made money because of it. And thank you so much. I appreciate you. He is so much more likely to give you another piece of advice because you're worth it. No, mentors don't like to waste our time. We're busy. We don't want to waste our time on someone who's not going to listen and follow up with us and tell us that they applied something that we shared with them.
So take out the word mentor here and put in the word humans. Humans don't like to have their time wasted. Humans don't like to feel not listened to. This is a silly, silly example, but it's the same thing. So when I got married, I had a lady that the place where I buy clothes helped me get a jacket and pants and all that stuff. And I had a couple of pictures in my phone. And after I got married, I felt really good in what I wore. I texted her and said, hey, I wanted you to see how I looked. I felt great. And she said, no one ever does that. And we're still friendly. We still text. She still sells me stuff because of the fact that I just stopped what I was doing and said, hey, you did a great job. I felt awesome on this important day. And those are the little things that you just forget to do sometimes. But now it's so easy. It's like, send a fucking text. Hey, Ian, I really value your time. I did what you said. It worked great. Just wanted to say thanks. Like, you can voice to text that in 9 seconds. And if you remember that end of it, in Ian's mind, it wasn't I helped this guy. It's this guy actually listened. There's value there. There was time spent and there was a payoff. And the payoff is it worked. And that feels good. Hey, I tried it. Didn't go as great as I would have hoped, but I can do a better job next time of maybe getting your message right. But hey, thank you for your time. Something like even like that, it's still really valuable, but it closes the loop. And the only way for these things to happen is they're just loops that stack on top of each other.
Hey, I was by Frank's side for his entire wedding weekend, and I can assert confidently he looked great in whatever clothes you
If I
put
could
on.
redo it, I would send you to a different place and I would have paid for your MC.
You had at least 15 changes of outfit over a 3-day period. You were like Diana Ross, just kept switching every time I look, a new jacket, a new little scarf to put into your front
It's the
pocket.
problem with me in the summer. I'm going to sweat through whatever it is you give me. I had 3 shirts I wore my wedding day. There you go.
Looks really good, folks.
We've got our technological IT department for nothing, folks.
My favorite part of the weekend though is as good as Frank looked, he made sure to send me and Nickel to the shittiest tuxedo place, and they screwed up all the measurements so we look like total assholes. That made him look twice as good as he already would have looked anyway.
You looked a little boxy. My favorite part of that weekend, I'm sure you forgot. You called me up and say, "I forgot to pack pants. Can you find me a place where I can buy some pants?"
I did. I had to go down the street. You did. You gave me a good little joint to go buy some pants. So
there we go.
Taking care of it. The next thing I would say
for
about
our loyal listeners that are trying to pull through this, as you can see, I have always been a mentor to Ian. He does look up to me.
No question. So the third thing that we would say in looking for a mentor is find someone who's just slightly ahead of you, someone who feels like they're within reach. Someone that is a little bit close. I remember we talked about this also on this episode, but we went to go see Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And Gary V is by this point like top of the mountain when it comes to marketing. And although David and I had fun out there, we went and saw a Dodgers game. We spent a few hours with Gary V, a whole day with his team. A lot of the advice felt really far away from where we were as a company. We hadn't sold a device yet. We were really early, and he was kind of 10 steps ahead of where we needed to be. We needed some like tactical boots on the ground. We're starting with nothing on social media advice. And he was diving into like, you guys should do an NFT. He was getting like the third level, right, chess on us. And it wasn't the most helpful advice, honestly. It was, we would have been better off if we'd have talked to someone who had just started a hardware company 2 years ago and had just built their social media following up that could tell us, here's the first 5 steps we took that worked, here's what didn't. So, sometimes when you try to go find a mentor and they're a little too far ahead of you, it's not relatable.
So I think there's two different types of mentors, and I'll break it into a slightly different thing, call it attainable and aspirational. So I started this off with stories about the IRS and looking at my travel. I have two really big compartments in travel as it relates to work, and it's usually to be in front of people or groups. And we're going to get into group mentoring in a second, but I go to things where there are people like me who look and feel and sound like I do from a business perspective, right? They have similar businesses, similar things. But then I go to things that are completely and totally far away, unrelated. I started going to tech conferences. I have a buddy of mine who's trying to get me to go to this tech conference with him. And he's like, the people are just smart. You just start thinking about things that are completely different. Ian put in the notes, like to talk about Tony Robbins. I go to Tony Robbins events because Tony Robbins himself talks about a series of skills, but he's Tony Robbins. Everybody freaking loves the guy. His influence and the people he brings into a room can seem completely unrelated in many ways, and you never know what dots you're going to pick up. So I think you need you need some people who are with you, some people who are a little bit ahead of you, and some people who are over the mountain. And if you have all three sets of those people, like the people who are over the mountain are probably, Gary Vee's not a mentor. You don't text him. He doesn't talk to you guys. It was an event that you saw him at. But he's somebody that is blazing a trail that you can look to and say, that's a thing to follow. But you can easily attain relationships with people who are where you are or slightly ahead of you. So I think it's a combination of things that you have to have in order to have the right arsenal of help or support around you.
One thing Frank does in his business, because he's been involved in so many masterminds, that I think is really cool, is he'll offer an aspiring, new person in the real estate business who wants to grow to Frank's level. He'll offer them to come spend a day in the office with him and his team, and he does some coaching, some consulting. He has a whole program set up for it. Takes them out to dinner. Sometimes it's 2 days, and Frank charges for it. It's not free. It's not cheap. It's training, but if you handle it right, these become people that Frank is happy to mentor. He roots for them. He wants them to be successful. Is there a selfish component of that? Of course. If they blow up and become big, he can say, listen, they came and did the Kava 2-day accelerator and it was great. But also there's an emotional piece of that of, I got to know you, I liked you. And so my last thing that I'll say on when you're looking for a mentor is there are times where your network is too limited to help you. And I'm going to give an example. My network, I have engineers, I have sales folks, industrial power business, real estate, home building, finance. That's my network, right? And it's a great network. It's a powerful network. It's a wealthy network. There are areas where it's incredibly helpful in some of the things that I do, raising capital, finding new clients, all of that. There was nobody in 2018 in my network that I could reach out to about building a video training program. I don't know anyone that's ever done that. I know plenty of people that have done training, no one who's ever built their own video program on any content. And so I muddled around for like an entire year and a half. And I there's only so many YouTube free shit you can try to watch to do it, where they're not showing you behind the scenes. They're not getting dirty. They're giving you high level stuff when you try to do it the freeway, reading books, watching YouTube videos. And I knew I needed to find someone who was ahead of me, who was making money, who was selling programs that had a successful program. And this is interesting. And this is where finding
I do. This is 6 months after you quit your NVR job. Pay to play, baby. Blew up. There's not a lot to add on that, and I think we've covered the stuff that's important to us. But this is kind of my real feelings on this. So Ian and I, we've used ChatGPT and Gemini, and I think we use Grok to tell us what they thought of our podcast, and it was really neat. But one of the things they said in there is, "Oh, you might get frustrated by the podcast because they only post like every 2 or 3 weeks." And the reason we only post every 2 or 3 weeks is we posted every single week for about 2.5 years, and then we took 2 years off. So if you do the math, that's about every 2 weeks. So AI, it's here to take over the world. But what I think Ian and I started to miss was intimate conversations around a topic. Ian probably doesn't want to admit this, but I know he learns when I say certain things, and I learn from him. I knew the Gary Blair story, forgot about it. I'm trying to build something off the ground. I'm going to text Ian after this and say, "Will you make an intro?" I want to do that. Like, that's the beauty of, if Ian and I wouldn't say we have a mentorship relationship, we're boys, we're friends. But some of these things transcend mentorship and become friendships or brotherhoods or like really big things. But it starts off, Ian and I started off as a peer relationship. But I've got great relationships because I've been able to humble myself and be the smallest person in the room and realize there's really great things to learn here. And I go to some rooms where I'm the biggest guy in the room, and it's not as fulfilling for me because you kind of feel like you got a bunch of leeches jumping on you. But on the other side of it, it's like that balance. Like, okay, there was somebody that you were annoying the shit out of at one point too, that was kind to you, that was patient, that answered your questions. So you do it. And it's part of the ecosystem. But there's not one right answer here. Mentorship is part of it, but it's got to be part of the whole thing. And you've got to pick and choose where it is you want to go. And saying, "Hey, I pay to go to Tony Robbins," or "I have a guy that I talk to every single month like Ian does. He has got clients. I pay someone every month that I talk to, but he opens up new avenues in my head, and it's worth it. So there's some stuff that's free, there's some stuff that doesn't, but you've got to be able to build a whole ecosystem around yourself, because like, as they say, it takes a village. There's no way to do this shit alone. All right, fair enough. That was one of the things I put in here. This is the difference between trying to do it yourself in today's world and paying a Gary Blair. Gary Blair cost Ian 10 grand for 5 lessons. But I will tell you that it is my feeling that if Ian went to Tony Blair's free stuff, if he has it on the internet, or anybody else's, Gary Vee's or anything like that, the way the internet works for someone who grew up in the 80s with a TV guide or the little thing that pops up on there, it's like you knew it was going to be on HBO for the next 7 days. I'm like, ooh, Thursday at 8, I need to be home to watch this, because it was programmed and you knew it was coming. It's not how the internet works. So if you're trying to find a diet advice, or you're trying to find business advice, it's like all the advice it takes from A to Z is put into a Yahtzee chute, and someone shakes it up real hard and dumps it on the table. And that's how the algorithms work on the internet. So they don't take you from step A to step Z unless you pay for it. It's going to be Y followed by B, then M and S, and it's completely out of fucking order. And you can't really get anywhere, because that's the goal. The goal is to get you more captive to something else that you'll eventually pay for. That's how the system works. So if you want to try and do it the bootstrap way, you do it with books or other things, because those actually follow an order. Or if you're trying to do it off the internet, it is very hard to do it free, because you're going to get advice that is out of sequence. It's the lighting. You look great. You look. Ian, I'll always call you my mentor. You're my huckleberry. There we are. Stick with us, folks. We got it coming. We're on a heater. We're on a heater.
If you like what you just heard, and judging by the viewership numbers, you did, hit that follow button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. And it lets Frankie and I know that, a few people are listening to this.